And I realized there was some sort of fuzzy part of the memory of coming over that hill and seeing a Michelin Man type monster, but more, it was very Scooby-Doo-ish from my memory. And I don't know if that's because I was 4 and that was the only context I had.
Well, hello there. I'm Cool Gray, and this is Cool Gray in Studio A. Welcome back to the podcast. We are in episode 12. That's not nothing. It is also the 5th part of my 6-part series on personal paranormal encounters. It's a beautiful, beautiful episode today. I'm really excited to bring it to you. Got one more after this, and it is a great one. So don't miss it. If you're not subscribed, subscribe wherever you watch, wherever you listen. All the links are in the show notes, and you need to just find me and follow me absolutely everywhere. I'm all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, even LinkedIn, if you're so inclined. Coming up after this series is completed, we are going to continue to have interesting conversations with interesting people in the hopes of stimulating deeper thought on a wide variety of topics. So some of the topics I'm going to be bringing you in the very near future are, well, we're going to talk about hypnotherapy. We're going to talk about art, film, literature, poetry, and even some more paranormal stuff coming up. I've got guests booked and scheduled out through July already, and we are only in February right now. So there's a lot coming up, and I really hope you'll stay on board, help build this community, and give me some feedback on what you're hearing and what you would like to hear that perhaps you have not heard already. Also, quick reminder that over on my website, you can take a brief listener survey that will also help me perfect this project that is currently underway. I'm doing what I'm doing for me right now, and I'm also reaching out for you. So please let me know what you're enjoying about this and what other topics you would like to hear discussed, and I would do my very best to accommodate you. Right now, I want to get straight to this episode. We are going to welcome the only female guest that I have in this paranormal series, and toward the end of the episode, I wax philosophical about why that may be. But I really think you'll love this guest as much as I do. And I've got something beautiful for a parting thought today. So here we go. I'd like to welcome my guest today. Valerie Lofaso is an empathic medium, a Reiki Master and teacher, a paranormal investigator, and author of the Tangled Web of Friends young adult paranormal fiction series. Though she's been an empath her whole life, she's come to understand what that means over the past 20 years through her research, investigating, and field work. She co-founded the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies, which operated from 2009 to 2019, where she managed and facilitated events, lectures, and classes in all fringe subjects. She also founded her Empathic Support Gathering, which continues today. I'm very excited to have Valerie with me today. Hi, Valerie. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I would love to start at the very beginning because this audience isn't necessarily exclusively paranormal oriented. You are an empathic medium. And let's start with the first half of that. Can you explain just briefly what is an empath?
So an empath, the more I understand it, the harder it is to describe. But the quick version is an empath is a person who is very sensitive to emotions and energy of other people. But it does go actually far beyond that. We can be energetically sensitive to people, living and dead, animals, plants, buildings, land, anything that gives off energy, which is pretty much everything in our world. We can be sensitive to that. So being an empath means that we are picking up on that energy and having to process it, and it affects us. Many empaths will have grown up hearing, oh, well, you're just too sensitive, and it's always a derogatory statement, it seems. They tend to be the ones that will gravitate to the animals at a gathering. They can be very sensitive to loud noises and large crowds and that sort of thing. So
yeah, it sounds like it could get pretty noisy in there. How do you filter and not be overwhelmed every minute of the day?
It's, that's why I have the empath support group, to learn how to manage the energy. Because we are being constantly bombarded, but there are things that we can do to help manage the energy. Some of that is limiting our exposure. A lot of empaths will say that they're basically hermits, but you have to know where your energy is to know when and where you can interact appropriately without it draining you too much.
Is it something you can diffuse or turn off? Let's say you're in a crowded subway car and you can't get off until the next station. Is there, what would be the way that you would control all of those energies in such an enclosed location?
That's a great question. It cannot be turned off, but like I said, it can be managed. And one of the best tools that I've learned, and I learned it from the medium who trained me on intuition development, is called a ground, clear, and protect. And it's basically using your mind for imagery, and you're imagining yourself grounded to the earth, whether it's roots growing out of the bottom of your feet, or you're just imagining yourself connected to the planet somehow. So you ground yourself. And then you want to imagine that energy that you don't need is being cleansed from your body somehow. Four elements are perfect for this: earth, air, fire, water,
right.
Any or all of them at the same time. And then the protection part is imagining a protective bubble or forming around yourself. And it doesn't have to be a bubble. It can be brick. It can be stone. It can be bookshelves, which is one of my favorites.
I imagine myself. So. Yeah.
Something like that would be perfect for being on a crowded subway, to just, you protect your energy, you put your intention into that protective bubble around you of, okay, I want to get to my stop without being overwhelmed by all of the people on here.
So it sounds like a creative visualization technique,
yes.
a focused, intentional focus.
Yes.
That's awesome. I think we could all use that, when we feel overwhelmed.
Absolutely. It's not just for empaths, it's for anybody to use. I learned it from my intuitive development teacher, who was not an empath, and she taught it to all the intuitives who came into her class.
Thank you for that. I think I can find some use for that, like tomorrow.
Yes.
Well, what about the second half of it? You call yourself an empathic medium. So, and I know in the list you gave earlier about the different energies you can pick up, you said people living and dead. So is that where the medium part of this comes in?
Yes. I use the term empathic medium to describe myself, mostly because being an empath is very important to me. It's so ingrained in me. There's no separating myself from being an empath. And the mediumship part, so being an empath is an intuitive ability. It's how you pick up on the energy. So being a medium, I can communicate with the souls of departed loved ones, but I do also communicate with non-human entities. I feel the energy of buildings, of land where, bad things have happened. I pick up on all of that. So that's why I use that term. I'm trying to put a lot into a little terminology.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you might be alluding to there with something you just said is that the residual energy of things that have occurred in a space can somehow be stored in the physical building. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Buildings, land, they absorb our energy. You think about a factory, that you had people working and there was multiple accidents and traumas and things like that. Those events leave imprints, and people like me can go into the spaces and feel those. I drive around quite a bit. My boyfriend and I go on a lot of drives around, New England, and there'll be times we'll drive by a building and I'll go, oh, I need to go in there and see what's going on, because that feels funky,
Wow. That's interesting that you would say I need to go there instead of let's stay away from that.
Well, at this point, I've been doing it long enough. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I want to know, why am I feeling that? What happened?
That's actually, it's a different perception than the one that I have carried about residue and buildings. For my understanding, my limited understanding has been when something like that is taking place that someone can pick up on, it's because there's a spirit that's bound to the location, and it is more of a haunting than it is residual energy being stored in the physicality of the space. Is there a distinction? Are they two different things, or did I misunderstand how that operates?
No, they are two different things, but they can be occurring in the same places. So it can happen at the same time. You can have the energy of a spirit in a location where something traumatic happened, and there's residual stuff happening as well.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff. Now, you have been aware on one level or another that you are more sensitive than the average bear since you were very young, right?
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't say I was entirely aware of it until probably fourth or fifth grade, probably around 10 years old. That was when I started getting bullied for being different. Up until that point, I just kind of went with it and didn't realize that other people weren't like this.
And so being bullied because of things that you could sense, or was it just a personality thing? Were you more introverted because you could feel all the energies, or what would be a cause for bullying?
I was definitely a weird kid. I was very theatrical. I liked singing and dancing, but I was also very open about energy and putting that out there. And if I felt love, I wasn't afraid to exhibit it somehow. And sometimes it was through singing or dancing, and sometimes it was through talking to other people. But what I've discovered is that people who aren't comfortable with the energy of being able to sense things, they would pick up on my ability to see through their facade. And
that's never comfortable.
No, and it made them uncomfortable, which made them dislike me.
Okay, so it was a response, a backlash. So you're saying around fourth or fifth grade is where you started to have that sense that maybe not everybody operates in this way, and that there could be some conflict. But I know that much younger than that, you had an experience that wasn't necessarily empathic in nature, but your first encounter with anything paranormal was an experience that you had with your dad. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about what happened back then?
Sure. Yes, I was 4 years old, and for the longest time, I just had this very odd memory that I tried to write off as a dream. But it had stuck with me from 4 years old. And I don't think anybody remembers dreams they had when they were 4 years old. So the only piece that I remembered for a very, very long time was being in a car at night with my father. And we were in Derry, New Hampshire, which is where I grew up. And we were driving down a dark road going up a hill. And coming from the other side of the hill was this very bright green glow, phosphorescent, very similar, but a little brighter than like a traffic light. But definitely not a traffic light, because there's no traffic lights to this day in the spot where we were. And I remember sensing my father's fear. He actually asked me to hide behind his seat, like get crouched down on the floor of the car behind his car seat. And I could sense that he was nervous. I wasn't nervous. I was curious. I wanted to know what that glow was.
Sure, like any 4-year-old.
Right. But he was afraid. I think probably because there's not supposed to be a glow like that. That's not normal. So I think he was fearful. And for the longest time, that was all I remembered. And then I started attending a group called Social Saucers from Mike Stevens, who you've had on the show.
Yes.
And that was it was a discussion group for anybody interested in ETs, UFOs, ufology. But people would come who'd had experiences, and I started listening to other people's experiences and started hearing commonalities. The green phosphorescent glow, for one, was one that I heard. And then another person mentioned a Michelin Man type ET that they had encountered at some point. And I went, why does that feel familiar? And I realized there was some sort of fuzzy part of the memory of coming over that hill and seeing a Michelin Man type monster, but more, it was very Scooby-Doo-ish from my memory. And I don't know if that's because I was 4 and that was the only context I had, but
Wow.
that was the memory. So people kept talking about things at this group, making me go, okay, maybe this wasn't just a dream. Maybe I should take this seriously. And then we had a man come into the group one time who's a local researcher and historian, and he brought a map of hotspots for UFO sightings. And on this map was Derry, New Hampshire. And one of the hotspots was the road where my dad and I had our experience.
Oh, wow. It was pinpointed to that level.
Pretty much, yeah. And I kind of went, all right, I should not be surprised by that at this point.
Yeah. Is this a road you and your dad traveled frequently, or were you there unusually?
Yeah, no, we traveled that road all the time. It was maybe less than a quarter mile from where we lived at the time.
So that's the only experience you ever had there?
Not exactly.
Oh.
When I was 12 or 13, I was babysitting for a family who lived just a little bit further up the road. And at the time, VCRs were, how you watched movies. And the only VCR in the house was in the parents' bedroom, and the kids wanted to watch a movie. So we were in the parents' bedroom watching something on the VCR, and they had a skylight right above the bed. And I wasn't interested in whatever movie. So I was just laying there looking out the skylight. And some odd craft flew over the house, and it was daylight at this time. And to this day, I could say it probably was an airplane of some kind, but it was unlike any airplane I've ever seen. And there's a phenomenon in the UFO community, which you may have heard about through some of your other interviews, where there's like fuzzy memories or implanted memories or like screen memories.
Screen memories. I'm familiar.
And I don't know if this was exactly a screen memory, but every time I try to figure out exactly what I saw, it's like it keeps changing, or it's like it keeps slipping just a little bit further away.
You can't get a good grasp of it.
Yeah, like I know what it looked like in my head, but I'll go online and Google, what are the weirdest military aircrafts in existence? And I will see these strange planes, and it's like, no, that's not what I saw.
Have you ever tried to draw it?
I do, but it's never, it's that thing where it's like, no, that's not right.
Oh, wow.
What am I getting wrong? I cannot grasp it.
Oh, this is so ripe for hypnotic regression.
Well,
have you done that?
Well, that's where I went with my experience with my father.
Okay. Let's talk about that for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. So
how much later? Because apparently it wasn't at 4.
No, it was after I had joined up with the team at the KRI Center with the Social Saucers group and heard all these other people, and then learned how to use my own intuition. Learning how to use my intuition allowed me to speak with my father, who passed away in 1997. So by the time I started taking the experience seriously, he was, he'd been deceased for quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so I never got to ask him about it. And so
in all of your life together, you never had a conversation about it?
No. For whatever reason, it wasn't something that was talked about. So I got to the point where I said, all right, I had formed a relationship with my father as a spirit. He had crossed over. My daughter was fairly young at the time, probably preteen. And I was kind of like, okay, you need to be a spirit guide for my daughter, because let's face it, she's your granddaughter. If you were here in life, you would be doing this for her. So let's do this in death. And that's not conventional, but
not impossible.
No, we made it happen. So he was around us. And so one day in a meditation, I said, you know what, I'm going to ask him about this. And so I called him forward and I asked him about, what was this? And he refused to talk to me about it. He just flat out, nope, not talking about it.
Wow.
And that's really bizarre because, first of all, he's a crossed over spirit. He has perspective that humans don't have. He's in that higher place. And he was being very protective, fatherly in that moment. But that also was an answer in and of itself, because if it had been just a dream or my imagination or something, he would have said that. He would have said,
I don't know what you're talking about.
that had to have been a dream, or or he would have confirmed it was a dream or something. Mm-hmm. So for him to not talk about it spoke volumes to me. And that was when I said, I need to do hypnotic regression.
So you did. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
It was a great experience. I don't want to go into too much detail on this, not to be elusive, but I do have a chapter in a book coming out this year that goes into detail.
So here you have an opportunity to tease it, and then we'll tell everyone to buy your book.
Yes. I did do the regression, and my father did join me on the regression, which was very interesting. Wow. And one of the things I will say about it, I learned a lot about it. It did have to do with my being an empath, actually, the experience that we had. And at the end, my father apologized to me because it was a beautiful experience. It wasn't scary. It wasn't hurtful or anything like that. But it was scary for him. That was what I saw in the regression. He was scared because he was an adult. He was almost 40 years old, and he had grown up in a time when the fear was really starting to be pursued in the UFO world. Like if you saw a UFO, you would be ridiculed. So be afraid.
Right. Sure.
And ETs are bad. They're scary. They're going to destroy us type mentality.
All the movies about invasion and takeover. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So he was very interested in sci-fi in life, which kind of makes me go, maybe
that's no accident.
Yeah. But there was a lot of fear there for him when we experienced it. So after I went through the regression, he apologized because he was able to see it through my eyes and see that it was a beautiful experience. And he had some regret that we never were able to talk about it because of that.
Without giving anything away that we might want to read about in the future, are you suggesting that you said it had something to do with you being an empath? Are you suggesting that they were there specifically for you? The reason they weren't just there and you happened upon them? Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read that book. We'll talk more about that in a little while.
Sure.
Let me ask you, how did you get to a place where you were able to make, you talked about this early experience, and then there seems to be just a period of time where you were struggling with feeling somewhat different in your school years. And then there was a point where you began to embrace this ability and cultivate it. When did that begin for you, and how did you begin to really grow into who you are?
That began soon after my daughter was born. She was born in January 1st, 2003. She was New Year's baby. And within 4 months, her father and I decided to separate. And so here I was with a newborn baby on my own. I was also living in Florida, which was not a good place for me. And I was, I had no family around. It was just me and the baby. And her dad was moving on to a new life. And I was looking back and I said, okay, what got me here? Years of being bullied led me to try to fit myself into the box and try to be what I thought other people wanted me to be so they wouldn't target me. Mm-hmm. And that was how I ended up married to somebody I probably shouldn't have been married to, living in a place I didn't want to be, and living a life that was not right for me. So I finally went, okay, I need to figure out what works for me. And one of the things that I'd always wanted to do was write. And I wrote stories all the time, but I didn't pursue it on any serious level. And so when my daughter was little, I decided, okay, I have to raise her. I have to do the responsible thing, but on the side, I'm going to pursue this writing thing. And I loved writing ghost stories. I loved reading ghost stories. I loved any kind of ghost story, whether it was movie or book or whatever. So I decided, all right, I'm going to try to write some ghost stories. That led me to trying to get a book published. And a publisher actually came back with constructive criticism, which I'm sure as a writer, you know how rare that can be when you get a rejection to actually get feedback instead of just a no.
Right. Yeah.
And they said, your story really needs more bite. And I kind of went, okay, what does that mean? That's helpful, but not helpful at the same time. But I realized all I was doing was writing about ghosts and mediums and didn't have any real experience with it that I knew of, which I actually had. But that was when I found the KRI group. That group led me to investigating. We investigated with a medium, which
What was the mission of the KRI group?
was kind of twofold. There was a side of it that was looking for some serious research into what is consciousness? How do these things happen? Like, we know people are seeing things, but what are they seeing? How are they seeing it? Mediumship seems to be real because these people are coming up with information that they shouldn't know about people. It's like when a medium pulls information from a supposed dead person that they shouldn't otherwise know, where is that actually coming from? So that was part of the mission.
Wow, that's pretty ambitious for a bunch of non-scientists. So it wasn't just a casual support group kind of thing. You guys were seriously engaged in figuring this stuff out.
Some of us were. We had a person in the group, the K in the KRI. He actually is still to this day pursuing his PhD in visual psychophysics. And that's his way of trying to figure out how all this stuff works.
I have no idea what visual psychophysics is, but I feel like I want to talk to this man. Wow.
Yeah, he's very knowledgeable. He's very intelligent, but his own experience after his father passed led him into, trying to figure out how all this stuff works. So that was part of it. Mm-hmm. And the other part of it was building a community of seekers, of people who had experiences or just, were on this path of trying to figure out life and what it meant for them. And connecting with that group, I learned how to do paranormal investigations. And we had a medium on the team who we utilized towards the end of the investigation. She would come in and do a walkthrough and see what she picked up on to hopefully validate evidence that we would catch with the cameras and the recorders and that sort of thing. She also taught classes in intuitive development, and I learned from her how being an empath is my intuitive ability. And I learned it basically everybody has intuition. It's just figuring out what our personal vocabulary is, like our intuitive dictionary. Mm-hmm. So when things happen, we can trust it. Trust is very, very hard when it comes to something so intangible as intuition.
Sure. So did you connect with the KRI group in order to try to stimulate some bite for your fiction, or did you join it to go looking for how to develop your intuitive ability, or did that just happen as a result of meeting this medium?
That happened as a result. I was going because I wanted to learn how to investigate, because that's what they were doing in my book, and going out and looking for ghosts. So I'm like, all right, if I need more bite, I need to do what I'm writing about, not just write about it. And I thought, and I took the class originally with the medium thinking I don't have any intuitive ability because it's not happening the way it happens on TV or in the movies, but at least I'll get information for my books. That's what I thought.
Right.
And then I learned, no, intuition is actually different for everybody. It doesn't always work the way it seems to on television.
So we had a little bit of conversation before pressing record, but I want to include it in this conversation. Mm-hmm. And that is my curiosity about how you differentiate you, me, anybody between intuition and just any personal baggage that you may be carrying. And the example that I used when we spoke earlier is I have personally experienced people say to me within minutes of meeting me, oh, I can just tell that you're a trustworthy person, a genuine person. I can pick up on this about you. I know you're a good person, whatever that means. And on the other hand, I have had years-long relationships with people that I've worked alongside of, who've had a chance to get to know me and see how I operate. And we never seem to really be able to break down that barrier of awkwardness or discomfort. I never feel fully trusted or sometimes even liked by those people. And I'm wondering, is all of that intuition? Is some of that simply anxiety or some sort of post-traumatic response on their part? Or do I actually exude both of those energies in different periods and both of them are correct? How do you discern, especially for someone like you, when you're picking up energy from everyone and everything and on multiple realms? How do you filter that and know what to trust and what to challenge?
I'm at the point personally where I trust my gut. If I encounter somebody and I think something is off with them, I trust that. I don't necessarily turn and walk away from them, but I will be cautious. But it's taken me a long time to trust myself. We live in a society where we're not encouraged to trust our gut. We're encouraged to trust the media, trust the doctors, trust the scientists. Don't trust yourself. We're always being told to listen to other people who know more than us. But really, we know more about us than anybody else. And so learning, like I said before, about, how your own intuition works helps. I think always questioning, even if you trust, and that's why I wouldn't necessarily turn and walk away from somebody if I feel that something's off with them, because just because I feel that doesn't mean I don't need this encounter for some reason. There's so many different levels to this. Not to jump in with a plug for my books, but I call them the Tangled Web of Friends series, because all of this is a tangled web. I'm always envisioning all these different lines connecting all of these different things, not just people living and dead, but the different things going on within us. Because one of the things that I really struggled with was I formed relationships with spirit guides, and spirit guides are going to be the spiritual energies that are with us throughout our lives to help us navigate life. They're not here to live life for us and to tell us every step to take, but they're here to nudge us in the right directions. But they will lie to us. And that was really hard for me to accept until I realized that, just like the parents who might talk about Santa Claus, there's a good reason for that. It's what the child needs to know. Same thing for us. Sometimes we need a certain lie to get us in a certain direction. Sometimes we need those people that maybe they're not the greatest people. Maybe we do feel a connection to them right away. And then maybe they hurt us deeply. And we're like, why did my intuition tell me to connect with this person? Well, there was something there that needed to happen.
So let me dive into that even further. And forgive me if this is a curveball. I'm guessing it won't be. I'm now wondering, and I'll tell you straight up, I honestly don't know where I personally land on any of the stuff we're talking about right now. And it's a big part of why I have these conversations. I'm figuring it out as I go. And I honestly don't feel that arriving at a decision or being able to, as I like to say, bang a gavel and say, I've decided that this is truth or this is right. I don't feel like that's necessary. The journey for me, the conversations, the intellectual stimulation is where it's at for me. So while, I don't even know what I believe and don't believe about any of this, but I know that I'm fascinated by it. And when you say something like what you just said, I'm thinking, have you ever run into a situation where you're saying you have spirit guides who may lead you in a direction? What about other spiritual entities that may be lying to you because they have malicious intent, or they may not be actually a guide? They may be more of a disruptor. Does that element exist? And how does one discern? It's that discernment and that knowing when to trust and when to challenge and when to cut and run and when to immerse that I find most interesting about this realm.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that's a concern for a lot of people. or it should be a concern for a lot more people in the spiritual world or in the paranormal world, you don't know what you're talking to. I have learned that what I do as an empath is feel into the core of the energy, whether it's a living person or a dead person or other. And that core tells me the intent. So for me, I can discern guide from non-guide pretty easily. It's not always easy to do, but one of the things you can look at is, does this entity seem to have my best interest at heart? And that is a phrase that I learned from my teacher that I've carried with me, is always, the energetic protection I talked about earlier, asking for only the energies to come through that are for my highest good, or, only asking to encounter entities that have my best interest at heart. If your intention for that is strong, then you can trust that when you encounter something, it has your best interest.
So that sounds like a law of attraction kind of thing.
And it's very much a mind over matter as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
These are concepts I haven't been exposed to previously. So thank you for introducing me to that. Now, you mentioned that we all have spirit guides. What about those of us who cannot perceive them or intuit them? Are they still able to guide us in ways that we may not even be aware of, in your view?
Absolutely. And it's going to be that little voice that, is your gut instinct. I'm sure you've had those gut instinct moments. That's your spirit team trying to nudge you in the right direction. They're doing it however they can.
What can those of us who don't necessarily identify as intuitives or empaths do to increase, like turn up the volume on that or increase that level of sensitivity? Is there a way to do that if you're not already feeling like you have that gift?
Absolutely. One of the best ways is to first acknowledge them. Just say, hey, spirit guides, I know you're with me. I'm sorry if I can't always hear you well, but I know you're here, and thank you for everything you do for me.
Wow.
That is a great way to start, because then they go, oh, okay. They want to connect. And that will, you could do that every day, make it a ceremony, light a candle for them and say that to them every day. That's a great way to start.
And then, so if I did that, and then I actually had an experience that was more profound than any I have had to date, I know myself well enough to know that my initial reaction would be freak out and fear. So it's like, okay, I invited this and now it's here. What do I do now?
So do your ground, clear, and protect procedure first.
Thank you.
And ask for only your spirit guides to respond.
It would still freak me out, but I would probably continue because I'm pretty adventurous by nature. I will say, I know that I've spoken to you before about recent losses that I've experienced in my family, 2 of them within a year, 2 very important, I would say the 2 most important men in my life besides my husband, and that is my dad and my brother who was the baby of the family and the only boy. So my dad died about a year and a half ago. And I have had many dreams that he has been present in. I have had many moments where I'll be sitting in my favorite chair watching TV at night and feel certain that I just saw him walk across the room in my peripheral vision, or in other ways can simply sense his presence. And the same was true with his mother, my grandmother, who was very much the matriarch of the family. The whole solar system of our family revolved around her. And she died many years ago, but I can still feel her. And I can't describe that any better than to say I can feel them. My brother took his life last May, less than a year ago. I cannot feel him. And we had an extraordinarily close relationship. I don't understand that. And I don't understand if it's connected to the anger that I feel for the choice that he made. Or I know you said something to me previously about timing, that the time isn't yet right. What's your sense of that kind of thing?
I would agree that is still the case, that it's a timing thing. And it's because you were so close. I have people that have come to me for readings and they really, really want to connect with a particular person. And then they have a random family member come through instead and they're disappointed. And it's like, well, you're not ready for this other person to come through yet. That's
So it would
all
be
it
more
is.
my readiness than his readiness is what you're
Yes.
suggesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can relate to that.
Yeah.
And that leads me to, let's talk about a little bit about the type of work that you're doing. I know you do field investigations, and I know you consider yourself to primarily be a writer. And this is also a place that you operate in because you're gifted in this area and because you've intentionally cultivated this area of your life. Do you actually do formal readings, and is that in person or virtually? Is that something you can be asked to do?
Yes, I do readings. I can do them in person or through like Zoom. I've done clearings through the phone.
What is that like? What's a clearing?
A clearing is, if you feel you have some sort of energy in your home or your business that is making you uncomfortable, I will do a reading on the space to see what's there. And if I'm allowed, I will clear it for
and
you.
You're able to do that virtually without physically
Yes.
being present.
Yes, because it's all energy. So
right.
it's all intent of the energy.
Right. I got that.
Yeah.
But you're still also doing field investigations as well?
As much as I can, which is not as often as I would like. I'm always looking for more investigation opportunities. Winter's a little tough, in New England, it's a little cold to be, going out into some of these places. But yeah, I'm always looking for investigative work. But clearings, I think, are my specialty. I'm really, really good at picking up on whatever is in a space and working with it.
And you've had some, I imagine, positive feedback from people after a clearing that they've noticed a difference?
Absolutely, yes.
What would you say is one of the most profound or powerful experiences that you've had operating in this realm?
Probably the one that really changed my confidence level in my intuition happened, I can't even remember how many years ago now. It was probably 2015 or 16. And I was still training. I was learning from the medium on my team at the time. And we were on an investigation, this really large house that was a rental, and they were having trouble keeping renters. And in the basement of this home, one of the reports was that the caretaker of the home, who had two Rottweilers, went down into the basement. One of his dogs followed him down. That's where the laundry machine was. And he did the laundry. And while he was getting things ready, the dog got cornered by something that he couldn't see. And the dog was reacting in a very fearful way. And the man had to pick the dog up and carry it out of the basement because he could not coax the dog out of this corner.
Wow.
So when I went down into the basement with the medium, she was doing her walkthrough and I was following her with the camera and supposed to be asking non-leading questions about what she was experiencing. And while we were down there, she was picking up on the spirit of a little boy. And the little boy, she said, 8 or 9 years old, was telling this horrible sob story about how his mother was so mean to him and abusive and called him, little demon child, and was just really horrible to him. And at the time, my daughter was, young, and I was a mother, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm an empath and I'm not feeling sad for this little boy. And I felt really awkward. So I didn't say anything because I'm sensitive. I'm a mother. There's so many factors here. I should be feeling sympathy, if not empathy, for this little child who was tortured by his mother. And so I'm just thinking, okay, maybe I just don't know what I'm doing. Maybe my intuition is just off. And the medium's doing her thing. And then she goes, oh, said, what is that for? She said, the little boy just reached up. He put one hand on one side of my face, and then he pulled me down and he bit me in the other cheek. I said, what?
Wow.
And basically, if I remember correctly, what she then established was what we were encountering was not actually a little boy, but a nasty, potentially non-human entity pretending to be a little boy. And so I went, oh, okay. So it wasn't a little boy. That's why I wasn't feeling sorry for this little boy. And that was when I realized maybe I was feeling something else. And if I had spoken up, what would that have been like?
And that goes back to what we were talking about before, about how you can discern between the well-intentioned and maybe not so well-intentioned. So it sounds like you were reaching into the core of that energy without even realizing that's what was going on in that moment.
I believe I was. I believe at the very least I was not, at least I wasn't being influenced by what the medium was saying. I wasn't saying, oh, yes, I feel this little boy too. Isn't that so horrible?
Yeah.
I went, that doesn't align with what I'm feeling. I'm not feeling a tortured little boy, a little child.
So did you successfully clear that space once this was learned what was going on there?
Yes. With the direction of the medium at the time. Yeah, she helped us clear the space. And
did you discuss this with her after the fact?
I did, but I don't really remember the conversation. I think she just acknowledged it as a really good learning experience for me.
I think you earned a merit badge that day.
I gained a lot of confidence in my abilities that day, and I learned, okay, maybe I should speak up in the moment instead of
that's
assuming I'm wrong.
So how did these experiences, now that you were immersed in this group and you were now trained as not only an intuitive, but as a field investigator, let's come back to your writing, and how did that make a difference? Obviously, you've started publishing, so you must have gotten some bite somewhere, even though it wasn't the bite in the basement. But I find it interesting that was a turning point for you. It involved a bite, and a bite is what you needed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been amazing having access to a community of experiencers and intuitives, and just really understanding that everybody experiences things differently. And I try to put a lot of that into my books. It's not just about this one person who's the amazing medium who gets to do all these things. Her friends have experiences as well. I also go into jealousy because one of the friends wants to experience more, and that's holding her back. Her jealousy is holding her back from being able to understand how intuition works for her. And she has to overcome that. So I try to put a lot of realism into what I write, even though it's fictionalized.
Sure. I mean, I don't think there's any such thing as pure fiction, honestly, because any writer exists and has had real experiences. And what in the world else do you draw on when you're going to sit down to write, whether it's fiction or nonfiction?
I agree, yeah.
I think there's definitely a place for this. You're saying it's targeted at a young adult audience. That's who you're writing to?
Technically, it's listed as young adult paranormal fiction. I think I probably, though, have more readers over the age of 40 than I do teenagers at this point.
You might have just earned a new one. I'm interested.
Well, everybody loves young adult fiction, and I don't write down to the audience. I would never speak down to anybody, but I look at it as you're either going to be a teenager, you are a teenager, or you've been a teenager, so you can relate. I also have the parents of the teenagers and other family members, and so there are adult characters throughout to relate to.
And so is this serial in nature? So there's a group of characters that appear like Nancy Drew mysteries, like book after, I don't know if anybody listening even remembers Nancy Drew mysteries. That's what I was raised on.
I've read some Nancy
Boy,
Drew.
Did I just date myself. Remember Nancy Drew? No, boomer.
Nancy Drew's cool, though.
She was awesome. She was kind of a badass for her day. She
Absolutely.
Was right there with the Hardy Boys, competing successfully. Girl
Absolutely.
Power. For sure.
Yes. So the books are serialized. It's a core group of 4 characters that will appear throughout the series, along with some other characters that will come and go depending on what's going on.
And how many books are there currently?
There are 3 published, with a 4th one I'm editing right now. and can't wait to start on number 5. I'm very excited to get writing on that.
Where can anybody who is interested, and I'm raising my hand, where can we get a hold of these books?
They are available online through any online bookseller, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, any of those places has them. The first 2 are in print and on ebook, and the third one currently is only in print. Hopefully I can find some time soon to get it into ebook, but I've been saying that for a year. So,
and they're called A Tangled Web of Friends.
Yes, that's the
and I
series.
will put some links in the show notes too. I guess Amazon would be the easiest place for people to pick those up.
Yeah.
What are some other ways that people can contact you if they are interested in field work or a reading or anything like that?
The best way to reach me is probably through Facebook. You can search me as Valerie Lofaso, author and empathic medium on Facebook.
And I'll link to that as well. Just check the show notes for more information about that. Is there anything else you would like to bring up that I missed that we would like for people to know about you?
I wouldn't say that it was something you missed, but you were talking earlier about encountering your father through dreams.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on that a little bit because that's another way to reach spirit guides and loved ones easier. And it tends to be a less fearful way. You had mentioned that if your guides come to you, you'll be afraid. You can ask them to come to you in ways that will not frighten you. They will comply because they do have your best interest at heart. Same thing with a loved one. But dreams are a great way to connect with people that we've lost, that we miss, because when we are in that dream state, it seems like it's easier for us to connect and it's not as scary. I've had, many, many dreams over the years with my father, and I love waking up going, oh, yay, he visited me.
So you're not talking about lucid dreams. You're just talking about being in a natural REM state and
Yes.
and then remembering afterward rather than becoming aware during the dream.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes you can become aware during the dream. That does happen. And, you can do something like put a photo beside your bed at night and, say, I would love for you to come to me in my dream tonight if you can. And, say that to them every night and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
It might take a while, but I think it would draw them closer to you.
Very cool. Thank you for that. I'm going to wrap up our conversation for today, but I am going to let you know that I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. I wish you lived next door so that I could make you tea and just sit and talk with you for hours on a regular basis.
I would love that.
Also, the series I'm doing right now is a 6-part series about personal paranormal encounters, and you are the only female guest that I have. So I definitely needed some feminine energy. I'm very grateful to have found you. Honestly, I hate to say this because it sounds sexist, and I don't mean for it to, but I have found it to be a challenge to find females to talk about anything paranormal that resonates as authentic. A lot of people who will tell me that they are operating haunted Airbnbs, or people who want to read tarot or consider themselves to be mediums or psychics. And I get carnival vibes from most of them. And not that I haven't had that experience with men, I've just found it to be more difficult to find women that I find to be genuine and authentic about the pursuit of this area of interest. And you certainly are. And so I'm very grateful for you. And I'm happy to know you and to call you friend.
Thank you. I call you my friend as well.
Thank you, Valerie, for a wonderful conversation. I'm really pleased that you joined me today, and I hope we have a chance to do it again in the future. To all of you listening or watching out there, please find Valerie. There are links in the show notes to her Facebook page and where you can find her books on Amazon. Show this lady some love. She deserves it. And, while you're at it, pop on over to my website, fill out the listener survey, connect on social media, and let's keep this thing rolling. Today, I have a very special parting thought for you. It's a poem by a woman who is known as Word Woman. Her name is Rosemary, not Rosemary, Rosemary Watola Trommer, and she's an absolutely stunning poet. I would like to read this one to you today. It is called Watching My Friend pretend her heart isn't breaking. And this will be included in her upcoming book called All the Honey, which is scheduled for release in April of this year on Samara Press. So look her up if you like this and would like some more of it. On Earth, just a teaspoon of neutron star would weigh 6 billion tons. 6 billion tons equals the collective weight of every animal on Earth, including insects, times 3. 6 billion tons sounds impossible until I consider how it is to swallow grief. Just a teaspoon, and one might as well have consumed a neutron star. How dense it is, how it carries inside it the memory of collapse, how difficult it is to move then, how impossible to believe that anything could lift that weight. There are many reasons to treat each other with great tenderness. One is the sheer miracle that we are here together on a planet surrounded by dying stars. One is that we cannot see what anyone else has swallowed. That hit me right in the feeler, and I actually reached out to Rosemary and asked permission to read this today. She graciously granted it, and I would encourage you to seek her out and read some more of her beautiful words. They are like nourishment for your soul. That is it for me today. Please join me in 2 more weeks for the final episode in the Personal Paranormal's Encounter series, and then thereafter, where we talk about lots more stuff. Until then, I want to say thanks for listening. Come on back, and I will see you next time. Cool Gray in Studio A is a fine-tuned services production. It exists for entertainment purposes and is not intended to be used as a sole source of information or advice on any subject. Find and follow this podcast at coolgraystudios.com.